Welcome ladies and gentlemen, Tactical H here, and today we have another battle replay sent in by Coops showcasing a Bretonnian army. Now the Bretonnians have quite a few special characters, with Henri le Massif having armor piercing distinguishing himself from the regular Paladins, and on the far side deployed in the trees to hide from the Skaven magical artillery, the ethereal Paladin, the Green Knight. Armor piercing, they have frostbite, and also a very effective terror against the low leadership Skavens. Now for the rest of the army, peasant mobs combined with men-at-arms, a rather narrow peasant formations due to all the investments in the character core here. Not only do we have two powerful paladins, but we also have the Fey Enchantress, a rather costly caster lord as well, bringing in a bunch of spells including Earthblood, Dwellers Below, and Reed Growth, while the cavalry core is also extremely expensive with two Royal Hippogriff Knights. They might be vulnerable to missile fire, but if they can dive bomb the weapons teams, their armor piercing can get the work done shortly. On the ground supporting them are some cheap cavalry, the Knights Errant, and in the corners a couple mounted yeomen ready to flank around to hit up the rear of the Skaven artillery box, which is basically surrounded by Skaven slave spears and clanrat spears, as well as a bunch of red ogres providing a bit more mass and armor piercing, protecting the artillery in the middle, Poisonwing Globadiers, and also Natibubo's sharpshooter, avalanche mortars, and the Ikik Sap Sap. Leading the army, we have a Grey Seer of Ruin coming in with a few spells, including Howling Warp Gale to control the Bretonnian flying cavalry, Crack's Call for some area of effect damage, and also the dreaded 13th spell. Other than that, there's also the Scorch ability bound to the Plague Bell, as well as Unholy Clamor, refreshing the vigor of surrounding troops. Now that's basically it for both armies. Let's get the battle started. A little while back, I actually showcased a similar hero core from the Bretonnian army where I was playing as the Ogre Kingdoms and got beaten by a physical resistance spam between Henri le Massif, the Fey Enchantress, and also the Green Knight. However, I was more focusing on the physical resistance combo there, so I didn't actually pay that much attention to the special Paladins. But this time we'll be putting the spotlight on Henri le Massif and the Green Knight. Now for the army engagement, the Skavens have already opening fire on the Bretonnian army, chipping away the health of Henri and the Fey Enchantress. So Coops will be hiding the characters behind the buildings and the terrain and avoid those Skaven artillery fire. But the peasants do not have that kind of luxury. They will be taking the brunt of that Skaven artillery. You can see a single volley of the avalanche mortars bombardment is already enough to rout off the peasant mobs. The other peasant is also wavering, but at the same time, with the peasants capturing the Skaven attention, Coops will be pushing forward, his characters maneuvering to surround the Skaven artillery box. The problem is that the Royal Hippogriff Knights, being rather big in hitbox and being quite expensive, makes great targets for the Skaven artillery to shoot at. The Nantibubos as well as the Ikik Sap Sap has already done some noticeable damage to the flying cavalry. On top of that, there is the Howling Warp Gale, being locked down by the spell and targeted point blank by all of these Poisonwing Globadiers and Nantibubos. They'll be taking substantial damage, but there's only one Howling Warp Gale spell, so the Royal Hippogriff Knights on the other side were able to drop down onto the avalanche mortars. With their armor-piercing attacks, they easily pierce through the heavy armor on all these weapons teams, doing massive damage on the charge. At the same time, the Green Knight will be throwing himself into the mess. On top of the Hippogriff Knights, the Green Knight also have that terror attribute. The avalanche mortars is already terrified and routing. Same goes for the Ikik Sap Sap crew. Being artillery crew, they really don't have the greatest leadership. Now with the artillery silenced, the Bretonnians will be bringing in the more fragile part of their army, the infantry and the Fey. They'll be putting more pressure on the Skaven formations, which is largely disrupted by the sheer terror bombing of the Bretonnian flyers and character. Now the only problem is that the Royal Hippogriff Knights are actually not that tanky, relying so much on their armor to protect them once they are bogged down by armor-piercing troops like the Red Ogres and anti-large Skaven spears. They are taking a lot of attrition damage in combat. With both Hippogriff units running low on HP and leadership, they'll be shamefully routing away from battle. But the Fey Enchantress is here and she is draining away the health of nearby units with the Mist of the Lady, as well as spamming those area of effect damage spells and abilities. First of all, a Chalice of Potion Comet dropping right in the middle of a bunch of Globadiers, destroying their formations. And right after that, following up with a Dwellers Below on these blobbed up Skavens. All the Clanrats here, the Red Ogres, even the weapons teams are taking some substantial damage from the area of effect spell. Seeing his minions getting decimated by the Fey Enchantress, the Grey Seer decided to charge into combat and challenge the Fey herself. But the thing is, Henri Le Massif is here. Not only is he providing that Guardian effect, buffing up the Fae's physical resistance by another 15%, now up to 35% physical resistance, he can also be a quite reliable damage source because he is quite different from regular Paladins. Other than the Paladin standard anti-large damage, Henri has better armor-piercing values in terms of weapon strength, making him quite effective against armored constructs and monsters, for example the Plague Seer on the Plague Bell. But the thing is that Henri seems to be quite distracted by a whole bunch of Skaven units, the Red Ogres, the Skaven Slave Spears and all that. So while the Grey Seer is playing around with his bumpy car, Henri is just swinging his sword at a bunch of Skaven chaff. However, as long as he's fighting alongside the Fae Enchantress, the Guardian will be keeping her safe. Though it seems that Henri is straying further and further away from his lady, and the Fae Enchantress is now tied down and pushed away by a whole bunch of Red Ogres. Koops needs to respawn and save the Fae before it is too late for him. At the back here, Royal Hippogriff Knights have regrouped, as well as some Knights Errant diving down, charging into the back line of the Skaven army, hoping to shut down the artillery crew once again. The thing is, the Skaven player responded with the Red Ogres and Skaven Spears, dragging down those shiny white knights in melee combat. They still managed to shut down the artillery, but at the cost of their own health. Howling Warp Gale dropping into the fray once again, and they're pinned down and slaughtered by the Red Ogres. On the far side here, Red Ogres surrounding the Fae and beating her down, and Henri, finally noticing the Fae is in danger, tries to squeeze past a bunch of Skaven infantry and cover her with the Guardian ability again. The Green Knight is also tanking a bunch of damage at the back with his physical resistance, capturing the Skaven attention, alleviating the pressure of the Fae and Henri, buying time for them to regroup once more, and now the Fae is back under the protection of Henri's Guardian aura. Over here, another Dwellers below is dropped, draining the health away from nearby Skaven units, but it seems that most of them has escaped from the spell itself, so they're not actually damaged other than this one single Clanrat Spears. But even under all this friendly fire, the Green Knight is still whooping the Grey Seer's ass with his armor-piercing attacks. Another Chalice of Potion was dropped into this blob of Skaven units, blasting away a bunch of Skaven Slave Spears and Clanrat Spears, but at the same time, the Men-at-Arms are no longer holding. There's a bunch of regrouped Skaven weapons teams and artillery crew blasting away at the peasants, but they are also probably doing a lot of friendly fire around the nearby Skaven units. The Red Ogres are now routed away from combat, partially because of the terror from the Green Knight and the fear from the Fae Enchantress, lowering their leadership and triggering their breaking. At this point, the Skavens are in a disadvantage with most of the units on the run. The Green Knight using his armor piercing going after the Grey Seer of Ruin, and no doubt will be able to finish him off, as he is a fast enough rider with Frostbite, easily able to catch up with the slow construct of the Skaven. The Poison Wing Globadiers are shooting at the Green Knight, but unfortunately that is just not enough damage to shut him down, while the Fae Enchantress and Henri Le Massif are just trying to drive their way into the backline of the Skaven, and once and for all shutting down all the Skaven weapons teams. The Avalanche Mortars are completely shut down by the Fae Enchantress, and Henri Le Massif also has his eyes set onto the Natty Bubo's Sharpshooter. Unfortunately, they will be routed away by the mere presence of these Bretonnian characters. Now, the Skaven Slaves and the summoned Storm Vermins from the dreaded 13th spells are trying to regroup at the back, attempting to salvage the situation. But alas, the summon timer is up for the Storm Vermins, and with the disappearance of an elite brigade of Skaven infantry, the balance of power shifts dominantly in favor of the Bretonnians, sealing the victory for Koops. First of all, GG to Koops, and thank you for sending in the replay. Now for the army performances, the cavalry themselves didn't actually do that much damage, as they are basically dragged down by the Skaven Spears and the Red Ogres. Same goes for the Men-at-Arms and Peasant, getting some really poor value, really can't even earn back their own costs, because all the heavy lifting were done by the expensive units here. The Royal Hippogriff Knights, one of them being pinned down by the Skaven magic and then shot in the face by a whole bunch of Skaven artillery and missile troops. They weren't able to do much work, but the other one managed to drop in and rout off multiple Skaven artillery, including the Avalanche Mortars and the Ikik Zap Zap crew. This is absolutely crucial as it disabled Skaven's most powerful tool to snipe out all those single entities, allowing the Fey Enchantress to get into combat safely and just stay there to drain away the health of all those surrounding Skaven units with the Mist of the Lady, combined with the area of effect damage spams like the Chalice of Potions and the Dwellers Below spell. She was able to do some significant damage to the Skaven army, earning over 3,200 gold value and almost 400 Skaven kills, while the other Paladins here actually not doing that much damage overall. Henri Le Massif is mostly there to provide that physical resistance to the Fey Enchantress, keeping her alive against enemy onslaught, while the Green Knight successfully earned back more value due to his much better combat stats, but still not quite able to earn back his value. But then again, in this game his main role was to provide that terror once those Hippogriff Knights got routed, and he did his job well, triggering a bunch of routes from the Skaven artillery, from the Skaven infantry, any Skaven units who are not immune to terror, which is basically the entire roster here, and of course in the end hunted down the Skaven Lord as well. And with the Skaven's weak leadership, a lot of the troops were kept on the run once they got hit by the terror from either the Hippogriff Knights or the Green Knight himself. Now for the Skaven army, we can see that the Avalanche Mortars really didn't do that much damage here due to a lack of good targets. The best target they can shoot at are men-at-arms, and they are dirt cheap, so it's not exactly a significant loss for the Bretonnians anyways. While the other troops here, Nati Bubo's sharpshooter, as always, a very solid missile troop, but unfortunately being routed early was not great for them. Same goes for the Ikik Zap Sap. They did some damage to the Royal Hippogriff Knights, but the crew never got back to the artillery once they got routed away by the terror. While the Red Ogres here did some pretty solid damage, managed to drag down all those Royal Hippogriff Knights, just that they're not quite enough to pull back the game. Poison Wind Globadiers, of course, always a broken unit, easily earning back their value with their Poison Wind effect and just great armor piercing damage in general. While the Skaven Infantry did some decent damage, some of them actually earned back their cost, but it's not something that the Fae cannot heal back, even after all those damage spell spams. While the Gracier of Ruin didn't do that much damage, as he is not a combat character. And that's basically it for today's battle. I hope viewers you enjoy it, and if you do and want to see more, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.